Good evening and welcome to the Rogers TV Telegraph-Journal Leaders Debate in the 2018 New Brunswick Provincial election. I'm your moderator, Mike Terry, and I'm the editor of the Telegraph-Journal, and we are coming to you from the beautiful Centre Communautaire Saint Anne in Fredericton. So I'll be the referee tonight, and refereeing means just making sure that we're not talking over one another so that we can have a great debate and we can help inform the electorate in this important election campaign. So before we begin, we'd like to take the opportunity to thank our audience for joining us and also to ask them, please be very respectful of the candidates on stage and give them a chance to speak. Please hold all of your applause until the debate is over. Thank you. So joining me are the leaders of the parties. For the NDP, we have Jennifer McKenzie. For the Liberal Party, we have Brian Gallant. For the People's Alliance, Kris Austin. For the Green Party, David Coon. For the Progressive Conservatives, Blaine Higgs. And for the KISS Party, Gerald Bourque. The candidates will be questioned by our panel, and they are Adam Harris, who is the Legislature Bureau Chief for Brunswick News, and Katrina Clarke, who's a reporter from the Daily Gleaner. The rules for the debate are as follows. Each candidate will be given a 2-minute opening statement. The first candidate will then be posed a question from one of our panelists. The candidates will have 60 seconds to respond. The remaining candidates will then have 60 seconds to respond, followed by a 2.5-minute moderated discussion on the question. Tonight we're going to attempt to ask as many questions as possible. A random draw was held before the debate began, and for our first opening statement, Jennifer McKenzie of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening. This election, the NDP is presenting a real alternative for New Brunswickers. Like you, the NDP believes in affordable education, accessible childcare, exceptional support for seniors, and a province where people can have good jobs and earn enough to take care of themselves and their families. The greatest challenge facing our province is that our youth are leaving. Too many people are struggling to get by, to find work that matches their skills, and are unable to put down roots here. People are looking for a party that will stand up for them and address the challenges they face every day. $15 an hour minimum wage, public home care, more affordable post-secondary education, $10 a day childcare in schools, universal pharmacare, environmental leadership. These are the things that people have told us will make a difference in their lives. Our platform and our commitment to you is a complete package that addresses the wage gap for workers while injecting dollars into local economies by giving families money to buy the necessities. The NDP's vision creates thousands of new green jobs through our Carbon Reduction Fund and new well-paying childcare jobs while improving local economies and supporting the growth of small and medium businesses, whether rural or urban, through our Public Investment Bank. At the same time, we are adding up to thousands of young parents into the workforce through the creation of new childcare spaces in public schools. These are the kinds of jobs people are looking for. This is the kind of future young people are looking for. I have met with people in communities across New Brunswick. Many are working hard and can't keep up, tired of unaffordable housing and a lack of childcare, tired of watching our young people leave because they can't see the way to build their lives here. That is why the NDP is presenting a fresh vision for New Brunswick, one that puts people first, a strong social safety net, and a strong economy. New Brunswickers deserve better.
Thank you. Mr. Gallant.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to the audience for being here. And of course, thank you to Rogers and Brunswick News for making this important debate possible. Over the last 4 years, as your government, we have been investing to create more opportunities and a fairer economy. We have invested to add more teachers to our classrooms and restore French immersion to grade 1. We've invested to provide free tuition to over 6,300 New Brunswick students that went to a university or college for free last year alone here in New Brunswick. We're investing to provide free childcare for families that need the most support. We're investing to help the middle class with the cost of childcare and tuition here in New Brunswick. And we invested to ensure that we have more doctors, a gain of 90 net new doctors for our families here in the province. Our investments have helped grow the economy every single year. This has provided more jobs today than when we formed the government, an unemployment rate that went from 10.1% to 8.3%, wages that have grown every single year, putting more money in the pockets of New Brunswickers, and the deficit that has been cut by more than half, to the point that we had a budget surplus, the first one we've seen in 10 years here in New Brunswick. And today we have the largest population in the history of our province. Blaine Higgs, when he was the Minister of Finance, shrank the New Brunswick economy. From 2011 to 2014, under his watch, New Brunswick was the only economy of all the provinces that shrank. It was because he was cutting into education, cutting into healthcare, and cutting into infrastructure investments. And make no mistake, he has a plan to cut deeper in education, close rural hospitals, and stop the investments that we want to make in our hospitals, schools, roads, bridges, and nursing homes across the province. And he said it during the leadership for his party that he would rip up the free tuition program, even if thousands of New Brunswickers have benefited from it over the last few years. A Liberal government will invest more in education, healthcare, and infrastructure to keep moving our province forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Austin.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in tonight to this very important debate. There's no question this is going to be a historic election like none other. The reality is New Brunswick is not in the best of shape. We have a $14.5 billion debt, an annual deficit that continues year after year. And the reality is that the only government to create a larger deficit over this current 4 years was the previous Conservative government, which created an even larger deficit over their 4 years. You can look at education, healthcare, people waiting 8-10 hours in emergency rooms, over 300 seniors at any given moment living in hospitals without the dignity of care in a structural nursing home. We see over and over taxes being raised while services continue to decline. I believe that we need to turn New Brunswick around. I believe we need a new set of thinking. Simple things like lowering taxes and eliminating corporate handouts. Both PC and Liberal governments over the last several decades give hundreds of millions of dollars to big corporate interest. $9 million to TD Bank, several million to places like Bell Canada, some of the most profitable corporations. Your tax dollars are going to them. Personally, I'd much rather see tax dollars going to hiring more doctors, more nurses, more teachers' assistants, making sure that our ambulance services is working the way it should be. We're committed to having tax reform, making sure that we eliminate the double tax and the small business tax. By eliminating corporate welfare, we can balance the books and put more money back in your pocket. The People's Alliance is committed to also reducing fees, things like annual vehicle registrations. We ask ourselves, why do we register our vehicles year after year? It's ridiculous nonsense. That's all it does is raise money for the government and unnecessary taxes. We will eliminate that to a one vehicle registration tax. We're going to make changes to how it works.
Thank you. Mr. Coon, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening. I'm David Coon, the leader of the Green Party in New Brunswick. I've served you in the Legislative Assembly for the last 4 years as the leader of the Third Party and represented the people of Fredericton South as their MLA. My vision for our province is a New Brunswick that is community-focused, fair, and sustainable. As your Premier, I would ensure you have the ability to shape the future of your communities. I would end the overly centralized, one-size-fits-all decision-making that occurs in Fredericton. Our 7 local regions and our 7 local health regions and their local hospitals would have greater decision-making power to ensure local needs are met. A Green government would take the same approach for our education system so that our school districts and our schools are empowered to best meet the needs of local students. I would turn back the privatization of our health care system so that profits don't push us out of the picture. Our extramural health services must be put back into our public health system. We would put an end to both overspending of our finances and the overcutting of our forests. In fact, I would make sure we get a fair return on our forest resources and collect the tax revenue that the big guys owe us. It's just reasonable. Seniors have been telling me at the door of how difficult it is to access home care services, despite years of talk that government after government wants to help them stay in their homes. We would act, not talk, by raising salaries for home care workers and increasing their benefits, improve training so that home care workers can make a life from providing the kind of care seniors need in our province. The flooding from Hurricane Florence today and the flooding of the St. John River a few months ago reminds us about the endless talk about cutting carbon pollution. A Green government would act on this as well. Thank you very much and enjoy the debate.
Thank you. Mr. Higgs, you have 2 minutes.
Good evening. No matter where you live in New Brunswick, we are facing the same problems. Our economy is tanking, and as a result, our healthcare, education, and social services are suffering. Worse than that, our children are leaving the province in record numbers. All the while, here in New Brunswick, we spend their future away. I'm here to tell you there is a better way, and it starts right now, right here in this campaign. I have a plan to turn our province around, and I have the experience to get the job done. I will do things, and I'm doing things differently. I refuse to play Brian Gallant's game. He's manipulating voters with outright lies about me. He will do anything to hold on to his job. Let me be clear. I am not cutting teachers. He did, more than 250 of them. I am not cutting jobs. No one is losing their job under a PC government. I am not closing schools or hospitals. I can balance the budget by spending smarter. I urge you to look past the smoke and mirrors. We are at a turning point in New Brunswick. I am not going to sit back and watch this government as it tries to grab our seniors' assets and pile tax on everyone, including the working poor. We can cut wait times in surgery, and we can recruit more doctors. We can and we must do better at caring for our seniors in their home, where they need it and where they want to be cared for. We can help children who suffer from mental illness, and we need to have better support for parents who have children with special needs. But we can't do it if our economy crumbles. Brian Gallant doesn't have the experience to get the job done. We are 9 days out from an election, and he doesn't even have a platform telling us how he will do the job. What is he hiding? Tax increases, job cuts? How is he going to pay for all that he has promised? I have the experience, I have a plan, and it doesn't involve job losses or school or hospital closures. Just a responsible government working harder and spending smarter to give you the quality of life you deserve. I need your support, your help, fighting for this province. A vote for any other party other than the PC party will give Brian Gallant a second mandate. I won't buy your vote, but I will earn it.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Bourque, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm Gerald Bourque. Most people don't know me too much. I never got much coverage on the CBC. I got 9 minutes in the last year and a half, and they didn't include me in the English debate, or the CBC debate. I was born in a large family of 13, and I moved up to North Bay when I was 5 years old, and I lived right next to a dairy farm where I spent a lot of my life, and I learned an awful lot when I was a young boy. And from there, I went to Stanley High School, and I got an education a bit, and then I went to heavy equipment operator, and I worked around, and I traveled to the Arctic Circle, worked in the Arctic Circle, traveled all across Canada, and I come back to New Brunswick. And the first job I got was driving a 30-ton truck on the Mackenzie Dam. Our party is fed up with the way government is run. And I feel the biggest thing is the debt. We got to get the debt under control. That's why we can't get things done. $82,000 an hour is going on interest, 24 hours a day, to the service the debt. And if we get that straightened around, then we can get things solved. The other things that I would like to do is bring a constitution into the province of New Brunswick. New Brunswick hasn't got a constitution, and I got my team to research, and they found 9 constitutions and reported to me, and I said, that's enough. We'll assume the rest got them, and we'll get ours. And the other thing I would do is put toll booths, 9 toll booths all around the outside of the province. Wherever you come into the province, that's where you'll pay a toll, and everybody's going to have to pay, but New Brunswickers would be able to take that toll and put it back on their taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bourque. We're going to move now to our panelists. Adam Harris with the first question, which is for the NDP leader, Jennifer McKenzie.
Ms. McKenzie and leaders, New Brunswick currently has its challenges, a lot of them. Pick one for me, the biggest one. What do you think is the single largest challenge facing the province, and how would you fix it?
Thank you very much for the question. For me, and what I've heard from people that I talk to every day, it is that the youth are leaving and our population is aging. And this underlies all the other problems we have with health stresses on healthcare, our economy, education, all the shortages that we have in the job market. And so the NDP has developed a complete plan around making sure that we can tell youth, we want you to stay here. So we have put in free community college. We've reduced university tuition by 25%. We'll give interest-free loans to students for as long as they stay in the province. And most of all, we're telling them we want you to stay. The Gallant government and the Higgs government before that actually increased tuition rates by 20% while they were in power. And so that sends the wrong message to students. So when I talk to young people on campuses, it's a wave of relief that washes over them when we talk to them about the fact that we want them to stay and to build their lives here.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. Mr. Gallant, on the same question of priorities.
The average age of our province is going up, and I would say that's the largest challenge that we face moving forward. This means that we have to have more young people in our province to ensure that we curb the aging population that we have. It also means that we have to be more innovative about the way that we deliver health care and senior care. That's why we will invest in free tuition and free childcare. We will help the middle class with the cost of childcare and tuition. We will double our investments in the Youth Employment Fund, forgive interest on provincial loans, and we will invest in our multi-year economic growth plan to create opportunities so our young people can stay here. We will invest to also create a fairer economy, raising the minimum wage to $14, freezing power rates for 4 years for families, and we are going to impose pay equity on the private sector. We will build non-urgent care centers to reduce wait times to our healthcare system, support seniors that want to stay in their homes longer, and invest in more nursing homes in this province so we can help seniors have the best quality of life.
Thank you. Mr. Austin, the same question on priorities.
Without question, the greatest problem that New Brunswick faces and the greatest challenge is the debt and annual deficit. And upon those two things, everything that these two have spoke about already hinges. Our youth leaving the province, healthcare, education, all boils down to lack of resources because the Liberals and Conservatives have gotten this province in a boatload of $14.5 billion debt and annual deficits that continue to go on. We will eliminate that deficit by ending duality. The tens of millions of dollars we spend every year on 2 health authorities, French and English buses chasing each other around the province. It's crazy. We give hundreds of millions to big corporate handouts while we don't have enough doctors and nurses to work our hospitals. We will eliminate the deficit and build an economy based on fair taxation so revenues can start coming in through a private sector driven economy that benefits all New Brunswickers. We will fix it with our plan for debt elimination, deficit elimination and debt reduction.
Thank you. Mr. Coon, your #1 priority.
Thank you. Well, to be a good leader, you have to be a good listener. And I've listened to a lot of people, and the #1 priority I see in the immediate term is fixing health care. Access to health care, access to mental health care, access to emergency health care, access to health care for seniors. And so what would we do? We would ensure that we hire sufficient numbers of nurse practitioners to reduce waiting times. They can provide many of the services that doctors do, and right now they're leaving our province fully trained, licensed, because they're not getting enough hours to keep their licenses in New Brunswick, so they're leaving. So we would make sure we would hire 40 nurse practitioners into the health regions and enable them to practice under Medicare so they can set up practices as well. That would make a huge difference by itself, as well as enabling pharmacists to deal with minor diagnoses and prescribe directly and be covered by Medicare to do that. This collaborative approach to health care is what we need to take in New Brunswick.
Thank you. Mr. Higgs.
The biggest opportunity we have, and experience has taught me that, are politicians standing at a podium like this, pretending they have all the answers. We have solutions all over this province. As I've traveled around the province, I've met with professionals in every sector, and they know what's wrong with New Brunswick, and they know there's a way to provide better solutions, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be in education, whether it be in social services, whether it be in attracting investments through better regulations. They have ideas, but we'll stand here and pretend we have them all. Well, I don't agree with that, and I have never been anywhere that I didn't get success if I didn't have a team working to achieve that success. We need our young people to stay here, and we need to find out why they're leaving. But we need to talk to people in every profession of what is it going to take to make them invest in our province, to do a better job for everything we want, because we want the same thing. Better health care, better education, better opportunities for our youth, and we can do it together, but we can't invent it here at this podium.
Thank you. Mr. Bourque, your top priority.
Well, my top priority is the debt, and I think it's because we had the Liberals and the Conservatives for so long put us in such a bad place. The reason that we don't have a lot of jobs here is that everybody's leaving because new businesses don't want to start up here. There's too much debt, the taxes are too high, and that's not going to work. I've been working the last 4 years to get CRRC in Moncton, and they're in there now, and we got a couple of contracts to start building railway cars. There's lots of other industries that will come to New Brunswick if we just get our financial house in order. And we could make windmills, we could get back into more technology on computers, and there's several other industries that we could get involved in. So I think the best thing to do is to make a change, and I don't mean from red to blue. I mean a change of selecting a new government than what's here now.
Thank you all. We now have 2.5 minutes of open debate, and I'd first like to ask Ms. McKenzie to start. You've heard a lot about debt and deficit reduction. Why are those people wrong?
Well, I think compared to other provinces, our debt and deficit are not enormous, and it is obviously a priority to address them, but I think the biggest concern is that the youth are leaving, because as the population ages, the cost of delivering services goes up. For someone over 65, it costs 5 times as much to give them health care. And so that is why when Mr. Gallant negotiated a deal with Mr. Trudeau to have per capita funding for health care, we're going to be in a lot of trouble as our costs go up like this and our funding stays down here like this. And so we have to, I think, look at building up the youth in this province.
Mr. Gallant?
The facts are that we signed a deal that is going to be allowing us to invest over $100 million in mental health over the next 10 years, invest dozens and dozens of millions of dollars in home care. We've secured $75 million over 3 years from the federal government, the only province to get this fund, to invest in how we innovate, so we can innovate on how we provide senior care to the people of our province.
If they're real investments, you'd get results. We wouldn't have over 3,000 children waiting to get mental health treatment. That's why we put that in our platform. You wouldn't be last place in economic growth. You wouldn't be in a situation where we're last place in wait times or second to last in education. If you're really getting value for the money in taxpayer dollars, you'd be getting results. You wouldn't have to talk about you spending more money. You'd see better home care, better health care. This can happen. But you can't promise the future away in an election trying to get elected. And that's been the problem for generations. Politicians buying votes trying to get elected.
I find it very interesting to listen to this red and blue nonsense. I mean, this has been going on for years. The reality is the issues with mental health, wait times, the issues with education, the issues with youth leaving our province, this didn't happen overnight. I mean, as bad as the Gallant government has done on these issues, the previous Conservative government was just as bad. We're no further ahead today than we were 4 years ago. In Mr. Higgs's opinion of just simply vote for him and see what happens, that's just ridiculous. People want direct talk. They want a real action plan to make things work. That's what we offer.
What happened on health care was Mr. Gallant folded too early. I'm a strong believer in collaboration, and we should have had a common front with our fellow premiers from the rest of the Maritimes and Newfoundland to argue strongly for funding to take care of our seniors.
Okay, thank you all, and thank you very much. This portion of the debate has moved on to our second topic, and asking our second topic will be Katrina Clarke on the issue of education.
According to Statistics Canada, half of New Brunswick is functionally illiterate, and we have literacy rates that are among the worst in Canada. What's your plan to improve literacy for both young people and adults?
Mr. Gallant, please, first.
Education is by far the best investment we can make to create more opportunities for our families and communities and to ensure we have a fairer economy. That's why we have increased the investments in education and early childhood development by 15.9% since we've been in the government. We have doubled the investments in literacy support, and we plan to increase that investment even more as a re-elected Liberal government. I want to put in perspective, Blaine Higgs, as the Minister of Finance, actually cut into programs that were designed to help and support people to increase their literacy skills. We will also invest to ensure that we show our young people how to do coding, a very important skill that they'll need for the future. We'll also reintroduce trades once again into all of our high schools across the province. And again, we will invest to ensure that teachers are supported in the classrooms and that they have the infrastructure that they need all across the province to have the right environment to be able to teach our children.
Mr. Austin, the question of education.
I've had many conversations with teachers, and I can tell you something that it is beyond admirable how hard the teachers work and the stress load that is placed upon them. When you have teachers that are taking out of their own pockets to look after the needs of their students, we have a broken system. When you have test scores that are some of the lowest in the country, we have a broken educational system. Now, these two parties can talk about how they're going to fix it, but we've seen what they've done over the last decade on education. The Liberals have cut teachers in the first year of their mandate. I'm sure Mr. Higgs and his austerity measures will do the same. We need an education system that works on getting more teachers into the classroom. An education system that doesn't give a one-size-fits-all approach across the province, but allows each school and each region of schools to be able to work on what they need for the individual students' needs in each area. I believe that it's time to reinvest money into our education system through eliminating dual busing and seeing that money going back into the class.
Thank you. Mr. Coon.
Well, you know, if you come to school hungry, you're not going to learn. The Child and Youth Advocate's recent report found that almost 50% of students from poorer families didn't see the importance of education. So if we're going to improve those scores, we need to improve the ability and the motivation for young people to learn. We need to tackle the millstone of poverty that is around our neck in New Brunswick. And that's why a Green government would introduce a basic income guarantee to ensure that everyone could meet their basic needs, their basic requirements for living, to help lift them out of poverty. And that means kids would go to school with food in their bellies. That means that motivation and the ability of parents to help their children would increase. We would start with 3 pilot projects around the province, ultimately rolled out across New Brunswick, and hopefully be a beacon of hope for the rest of the country to implement a similar approach.
Thank you. Mr. Higgs.
Get politicians out of the classroom. That's been the single biggest barrier to success in the classroom. In the last 35 years, there's been over 37 major curriculum changes in the Anglophone system, according to the NBTA president. Past NBTA president said that the last thing teachers get a chance to do in the classroom today is teach. So why do we continue to invent programs? Why do we change programs without the data to support that, as Brian Gallant did earlier in his mandate? Why do we think we can stand here with the solutions? I've talked to numerous teachers, as I'm sure many have, and they have solutions. We just can't keep pouring more people into a classroom and expect the best result. Let's have teachers tell us how our kids can be the best they can be and compete anywhere in this country or in this world for that matter. I am tired of our kids being 8th and 9th in the country. Last place for New Brunswick is over. We can fix this, but we can't pretend we have a solution, but we have the professionals right here in New Brunswick that can make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Higgs. And Mr. Bourque on the education question.
Yes, I think that it's been 50 years since they brought in bilingualism, and both these governments have not figured out how to teach it. I had a very gifted student, or daughter rather, and when she went to Stanley High School, they came to us and said, well, she really should go on an exchange program, and she went to France. She got over there and they were teaching 4 languages, and she wrote home and said, Dad, they're crazy fighting over 2 languages. They teach 4 here, and if they're going into business, they teach 7, and they teach them all in the same school, and they're all learning it properly. So there is a better system and a better way, and I'd need more time, but yes, it can be done. And the government's got to do it, but we got to help get this debt under control first. Thank you.
Ms. McKenzie.
The NDP is very concerned about low literacy rates in this province, and we have a plan to raise literacy rates. The answer is not decentralization, as I heard Mr. Coon, Mr. Austin, and now Mr. Higgs say. The answer is actually what, Gerald said. There are evidence-based, well-understood practices for providing conditions for optimal learning. And one of the things that you need to do out of the gate is remove the barriers to learning. So if a child is coming to school with trauma from the home, they're worried about their parents, they're not going to be able to learn. We also have really good practices like team teaching, self-directed learning, differentiated instruction, experiential learning. There's all kinds of good ways of doing things. It takes a strong school system, it takes a strong organization, and there are many elements of that already here. However, you can make it stronger. It's really important that we also remove the barriers to learning by hiring things like public health nurses, psychologists, social workers, speech therapists, and occupational therapists in our schools, and that's in our plan.
Thanks very much. So we're now going to turn to an open discussion on the topic of education. I'm just going to ask the question to begin the open discussion to Mr. Higgs. You say that the Premier spent money poorly or changed curriculums. Why was he wrong in what he did?
Because in the case of the French immersion, moving it back to grade 1, the results for the grade 3 change weren't even in yet. The data wasn't even formulated, and because the testing hadn't been done. So, in fact, why would you change anything until you actually have the results to make that change?
Is that a fair criticism?
It's not. In 2012, I believe, it was under the Blaine Higgs Conservative government, there was a report that was done, issued by the Conservative government of the day, which Blaine Higgs was a part of, to look at French immersion and where it should start. And that commission and report was done by a former Minister of Education from a Liberal government and a former Minister of Education from a Conservative government. After listening to hundreds of parents, students, experts, people from academia, they made the recommendation that French immersion should be restored to grade 1, so when we formed the government, that's what we did.
Mr. Austin, could you comment on that?
Mr. Glenn, I find that very interesting. I mean, you talk about French immersion in all the schools. It's great to offer the program, but if you don't have the teachers to actually teach it, what good is it? I mean, at the end of the day, look, we struggle with 2 languages in this province, which baffles me. You've got cities like Toronto with over 4 million people, multiple dialects and cultures. Look at European nations where children come out graduating in many different languages. Here in New Brunswick, under these 2 parties, we can't teach 2 simple languages, French and English.
Ms. McKenzie, I know you want to weigh in.
Gone too far.
I think it's not a question of structure and not a question of where the entry point is. It's clear that children learn languages better when they're exposed earlier. However, you can change the type of instruction that you give to children so that they are better at comprehension and better at oral proficiency. And so that's the kind of changes that we need to make in our education system so that children have the best opportunity to learn the most in the most valuable way, so that they will be able to use it in their lives going forward.
Which children, though? The ones in immersion or the ones not in immersion? This
Both.
is the problem with the system.
Both.
This is the problem with the system. It's streaming
One of the key things about improving overall education of our children is improving the learning environment. That's key. If you've got a strong, positive learning environment, then you're going to learn. We've got excellent teachers. We need to help improve the learning environment by ensuring that the kind of behavioral therapy that we've pioneered in the preschool program for autistic kids is streamed through the schools so that kids through their entire school career get that kind of therapy so that they can better be included in the classroom.
Okay, thank you, folks. That was very good debate and discussion. And the third topic, for which the question is going to be asked by Adam Harris, relates to health.
Mr. Austin and leaders, New Brunswick is the oldest province in Canada with the highest percentage of residents aged 65 years old and older. That presents a number of challenges: a lack of hospital beds, the inability for seniors to live in their own homes, doctor availability. We're a province of 750,000 people. How can you make this work without spending billions we don't have?
Mr. Austin.
The first thing we have to do is quit spending money on things we don't need, like dual health authorities. Why are taxpayers paying $40 to $60 million every single year for Vitalite and Horizon, which both provide the same services to patients? What we are saying is merge these two health authorities together, save $40 to $60 million a year, money that can be reinvested to hiring doctors and nurses for both Francophone and Anglophone residents of this province. Relating to seniors, we cannot allow any longer for 300 seniors plus to be living in hospitals year after year. This is disgraceful in a civilized society. And Mr. Gallant's approach of building more nursing homes sounds great in theory, but if you don't have enough nurses to actually work in these nursing homes, it's just an empty promise. We need true government with real results that will get a plan to get healthcare back in order. We have that plan. We will do just that.
Thank you. Mr. Coon on the health issue.
Thank you. Well, New Brunswick isn't an island. We're part of Canada, and part of the deal in Canada is that all Canadians should receive comparable kinds of services across the country. And so I would go back with the premiers of Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland and Labrador to reopen the case that we're not being treated equitably by Ottawa when it comes to healthcare, that in fact our provinces, our region need to be treated equitably. We need appropriate funding that recognizes our demographic realities here, the aging population we have. That's what I would do. We're part of Canada. We're Canadians as well as New Brunswickers, and we need to stand up as Canadians, and we need a premier who will stand up for us as parts of Canada, as a part of Canada, as Canadians in this country who deserve and should and have a right to receive the kinds of services that would ensure good health care for our seniors as our population ages. That's what I would do.
Thank you. Mr. Higgs.
Talking recently to the Nurses Union, we basically realized that, you know, if we had 25 or so additional nurse practitioners in the system, we could eliminate the 20,000 plus patients that do not have family doctors or don't have access to primary care. When you look at the home care model and this idea of spending tax dollars to create employment, when in terms what our goal is to spend money to get a better home care model that actually keeps patients and keeps seniors in their homes longer. I mean, the money can so easily be redirected because it's an opportunity to get results where people want to be and where they want to live. We've talked about getting rid of billing numbers because that's been an issue in the province to get family doctors. We've said that the taxes are too high for physicians because they leave the province. They're not coming here. Stéphane Robichaud, the chair of the Health Council, recently said we have lots of money in the system. We just spend it so poorly. Taxing more people is not the answer. Getting results for the taxes spent is an opportunity, and we must get better.
Thank you. Mr. Bourque.
Yes, I think there's several answers to the question, and I'll go along with looking after the folks in their own home. That's where most of them want to stay. We should work on a program where that can be done. I helped look after my mother until she was over 100 years old, and she passed away in her own home. There's lots of money, I think, that is being wasted and can be redirected. And I think it's going to take a wide range of different little programs that's going to kick in and help all these problems. But the seniors are a very serious problem, and we have to look after them, and there's ways of doing it. If you got the will, there's a way. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McKenzie, on the same issue.
Thank you very much. On this question, we've designed our platform around addressing the challenges that we face in terms of an aging population. And so we have programs to try to keep the youth here and attract youth from other provinces. Our Premier has already capitulated on the funding. So we've looked at how we can improve the healthcare system. When you look at the healthcare system, you have the people at the bottom, lots of them who get sick, and you don't want them to have to get to the point where they have to go to the more expensive cost of providing healthcare. And so we have things like returning extramural under the public sphere in Telecare. We have a really good, strong home care program planned. We're hiring 100 new nurse practitioners to help on the front lines. We have community-based care in community centers. We have investments in our nursing homes right away that will help to keep seniors from
getting injured. Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. And finally, Mr. Gallant.
A re-elected Liberal government will invest in education, training, and youth employment opportunities. But we also understand how important it is to ensure that when a loved one or a friend is sick or injured, that they're able to get the health care that they need and deserve in a timely fashion. We will invest to reduce wait times in our province. We will aggressively recruit, hire, and retain more doctors. 90 net gain is the goal. We will hire 40 more nurses. We will hire 50 more nurse practitioners, and we will hire 80 more LPNs. We will also invest in our hospital infrastructure and equipment to make sure our healthcare professionals have the right environment to deliver the best care possible. And we will create non-urgent care centers to ensure that we can reduce wait times in our emergency rooms. A Liberal government will invest to ensure that we keep giving our families the best quality care possible.
Thank you. And I'd like to say on this issue that repeatedly any polling done says the issues surrounding health are number one with voters. I think it's very important to the people in the audience and the people at home that you speak to that. So we have 2.5 minutes to talk about whether or not it's about how much money is in the system or how that money is used. And we're going to start with Ms. McKenzie.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we've just announced is our plan for pharmacare. Public health care was, of course, started by Tommy Douglas, the founder of the NDP. And most countries now understand that pharmacare is an absolutely vital component of this. When you have people going to the hospitals because they haven't been able to afford their medication, then that's a problem, and that will end up costing far more when you look at the overall healthcare costs.
Mr. Coon, you want to weigh in on pharmacare or another aspect?
Well, fundamentally, we're going to have to ensure our health system is affordable and effective, we're going to have to restructure it. We've got to abandon the old model where the doctor is the sun around which all the planets orbit. We've got to have a collaborative approach where we, as patients, have a collaborative team working for us that includes nurse practitioners, it includes doctors, it includes nutritionists and other health professionals, including pharmacists.
Mr. Coon right about that?
He is, and in fact, that's why we're very pleased to be investing in the Family Medicine New Brunswick with the New Brunswick Medical Society program. This is going to do exactly what Mr. Coon just talked about, make sure that there's a team approach around the patient. It will help ensure better access to primary care and better quality care because, like Mr. Coon mentioned, we'll have nurse practitioners and others playing the role that they can to ensure that our families are as healthy as possible.
Mr. Higgs, you've talked about that it's not so much the money in the system, but how it's used. So why is Mr. Gallant wrong?
Well, there's no question he can spend money. I mean, he's proven that. He spent the cost of government is $1 billion more a year now than it was 4 years ago. The fact is there isn't anything any better. And if you talk about health care, we're the last in wait times in every category, every single category. Longest in wait times in every category of family physicians referring to specialists, longest in wait times. The mental health situation he talked about and got money from, and he broke ranks with the provincial leaders.
Is that
Same thing.
A liberal problem, a conservative problem, or general government problem?
It's just unbelievable is what it is. I mean, to have the current government go on about how they're going to fix it. They're just going to throw nurses and doctors out there. We don't know how they're going to pay for it. The difference with us, we have a plan on how we're going to pay for it. And for Mr. Higgs to go on about how terrible this government is, this didn't happen in 4 years, ladies and gentlemen. This has been going on for decades with our healthcare system. We have patients in hallways lined up waiting in ambulances because there's not enough room in the hospitals.
Mr. Bourque, are any of these guys
responsible for it?
I don't think so. They're all spending way too much money, and we haven't got the money.
Thank you.
We can work it down.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move to our next question, and this question is going to come from Katrina Clarke, and the issue is transparency, and the question is for Mr. Coon.
Mr. Coon and leaders. In British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, parents can find out if their child's teacher has been disciplined for misconduct. In New Brunswick, they can't. What will your party do to address this issue of secrecy surrounding teacher discipline and the general lack of transparency in government institutions?
Well, secrecy in New Brunswick, Katrina, has reached epic proportions. And it's forcing anyone trying to get a little bit of information to go under the Right to Information Act, which has been badly battered and is no longer as effective as it was, instead of just releasing the information to you when you request it. And I know this well because I've had to go to the Right to Information Act regularly. I've had to go to court when governments refuse to release information, even when the Integrity Commissioner recommends that that information be released. Our Right to Information legislation needs to be modernized, needs to be improved, but it is fundamentally a question of leadership, and that is we need a leader, a premier, who's all about open government. I would throw the curtains open on the windows of government because the business of government is the business of the people in this province, and that is my commitment. We need to be open. We need to be transparent so people know what is going on, so citizens can understand what their government is doing, and that's democracy, folks.
Thank you. Mr. Higgs.
Well, we have an integrity commissioner for a reason, and the idea is when there's a ruling made, it needs to be followed up. I think there's sensitivities around it, but certainly in the education and cases with children and teachers, there needs to be that openness that protects both child and teachers. But in the case of government as a whole, you know, we've talked about an open portal to put information available that becomes more transparent into what is actually happening in government, not how money's being spent, but the results that are being achieved. Not just saying more that I'm spending more and it's going to get better, but actually putting it out there what results are actually being achieved. And I am confident that as we show the success in different areas, it will become like an epidemic where people will say, I want to be part of a success story. I'm excited about the people that want to be part of a New Brunswick that's moving forward in a very open and transparent way. When I talk about results, I talk about all the stats that put New Brunswick in last place. And that's what we have right today. That is not acceptable, and that means openness in government. We had policies that were repealed by this government that did just that.
Thank you. And Mr. Bourque, is the government transparent enough?
No, the government's not transparent enough. Just to prepare myself for this election, I went to the Right for Information Act and I got snowballed more times than I did in the middle of winter. You're spending taxpayers' dollars and the people should know what it's being spent on. And if the government's ashamed of what it's being spent on, it probably shouldn't be spent on it and how it's being spent. There's got to be more transparency. That's all there is to it. Thank you.
Mr. Bourque. Ms. McKenzie, same question.
Well, I'm not a total expert in this area, but it's the Teachers Association in Ontario that publishes the outcome of disciplinary investigations, not the government. I do believe that it is important that once a finding is made, that people have access to it, especially when we're looking at vulnerable populations like children. I think that we do have a serious problem with transparency in New Brunswick, in terms especially around the privatization of healthcare. So when we look at what is going on in Ambulance New Brunswick, when I travel from one corner to the other corner of the province, I sometimes talk to the paramedics and they say, drive very carefully, Jennifer, when you get to this part of the province, because the response time for the ambulance is very long. And so the concern is, as we transfer all the different agencies to the private healthcare system, to the private enterprises, you know, that the same sorts of things are going to start happening with extramural. You know, what is it?
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. Mr. Gallant.
Transparency is very important, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because it leads to better decisions and better discussions because people are informed. With that said, of course, we always have to balance the fact that there are rules, laws in place when it comes to confidentiality and privacy. When it comes to the specific question about teachers, as I think most New Brunswickers know, the districts are in charge of that aspect, and I've already publicly said that I would like the districts to be much more forthcoming when it comes to that information. We have done a lot over the last few years to improve transparency in government. We actually ensured that there could be no longer corporate or union donations to political parties. We slashed the amount that somebody could give by 50%. We have made sure MLAs have to put their expenses online. We have also passed legislation to ensure political parties during campaigns have to cost their promises, and we created the lobbyist registry as well as the integrity commissioner, all with the goal of being more transparent as a government.
Thank you, Mr. Austin.
Mr. Gallant's going on about transparency. Yet the media actually had to take his government to court to find out how much was paid to the former chief medical officer because they would not disclose those records. Just ask the MLAs that go to committees to try to find information on Ambulance New Brunswick and how hard they have to push to get, again, public information. Let's go back 4 years. Let's look at the previous Conservative government. They had a revision of the Official Languages Act in which we asked and we pleaded to have open and public respectful dialogue. Yet, the previous PC government held it behind closed doors, all the while giving further strength and mandate to the official language commissioners, which created all the division that we see today. Both of these parties are the same. What we have committed to is the Auditor General receiving twice the amount for her budget to find out where the money's going and to increase the amount of accountability for government as a whole. You have a right to know, you're the taxpayers, and none of this should be happening in New Brunswick.
Thank you. Well, we're going to do an open discussion for 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and I'd like to start by asking the question of what role a premier takes in leading transparency, in directing those within the province to be more transparent. It's one thing to say you're in support of it, but what will you do in order to really make those changes? Under you, Mr. Gallant, in fact, some of the right to information legislation has been tightened. So I'll ask you to start.
Well, I won't go through the list again of the things that we've done to make sure that we are more transparent when it comes to government operations. And I will say that it is very important for us to ensure that we respect entities that are independent. And district educations, the education districts are independent. And I think that there would be some on this stage that if we would have intervened on other matters, they would be criticizing us for that. So of course, we want to make sure we're as transparent as possible, and the entities that are delivering important services to the people of our province are as transparent as possible, and that's why I publicly asked the districts to be more forthcoming when it comes to those reports.
Well, not at all. I mean, the reason governments create this cloak of secrecy is because it makes it difficult for people to tell the difference between the spin and the substance, and we're seeing way more spin than substance. So the more that happens, the more secrecy you've got, and that's obviously not democratic. So it lays at the feet of the Premier. The Premier's got to open, whoever's the Premier has to open this up, just like Richard Hatfield did. Now, Richard Hatfield is one who brought in the Right to Information Act.
Well, I think one of the key values in transparency is that you get the public able to comment on the policy of the government. And that helps the government to make better decisions. You know, when you have something and people are directly affected by the policy that is being made, they can come and say, no, that won't work.
So is this government transparent enough?
No, not at all. Not even a little bit.
Mr. Austin.
Yeah, look, you want to talk about transparency? Shall we go back to AdCon? You know, there you've got $70+ million which just vanished into thin air. When the Auditor General asked for a little increase in her budget to be able to do a forensic audit, this government denied them. The PC government was in government for 4 years. They could have dug on that and made sure the public knew where their money was going. Yet they did nothing.
How about that,
until
Mr.
they were in
Higgs? You were in
opposition, of
government
course.
for...
Well,
then they gave these files to the RCMP. When you were in opposition.
We actually did the audit.
Just let Mr. Higgs answer.
We actually did push for the Auditor General to do that. And in fact, when we were there, the Auditor General, we improved her ability to look into government operations, updated acts in 1982. We gave her the increased funding in 2 years of our mandate. We also, when we talk about, when the Premier talks about donations for unions and getting rid of that, we brought that motion forward, which they accepted. The cost of election promises, another issue Gallant will talk about, but he actually, all of his promises are outside of that.
We were very pleased to support the motion brought forward by the Conservatives to ban corporate and union donations, and I think it was a great demonstration that no matter where the idea...
To help the big parties.
Well, I think it's very important for us to note that corporate and union donations are now banned.
I think we touched a nerve with that one. Okay, that's great. So thank you. We have our next question, which is coming from Adam Harris, and it'll be asked of Mr. Higgs, and it's on the question of bilingualism.
Mr. Higgs and leaders, this is Canada's only official bilingual province. Question, does the Premier of New Brunswick need to be bilingual? Why or why not? And how does that impact his or her ability to govern the province as a whole? Also, how do you balance respecting culture and addressing realities on things like law enforcement, buses, and ambulance services?
So I've said openly many times I support our bilingual province program in this and us being an official bilingual province. There's no doubt about that. And I'm working to become bilingual. But you know, I agree it's a very important skill, but it's not the only skill you need to bring to the Premier's office. We've seen that we need more than that in order to fix our province, and in order to fix our province throughout New Brunswick. Because what we're seeing all over the province is kids are leaving home. Communities are disappearing because they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the resource to stay and sustain their economy. So when I look at this and I'm saying, how do we fix this for everyone across our province? We do it by having a program, working with people, and I have a great team that can represent anyone, anywhere in the province. And I'm proud of that team. So yes, it's an important asset to be bilingual, but it's not the only thing. We need to do more for our people in this province, everywhere in this province, and I'm convinced that I can do that because I have talked to people and businesses every part of this province, and they want help from someone who has experience to get it done.
Mr. Bourque, on the issue of bilingualism.
I don't think it is necessary to be bilingual to be the leader of the province. I believe that with all the modern translation equipment and all that stuff, everybody can get served properly. And I also really am proud of the French. They have learned a lot of English that we don't have. We never learned French as good, so that's it. But if you really want a bilingual premier, well, better vote Mr. Gallant back in. He's putting this province in debt in both official languages.
All right, please, folks. And Ms. McKenzie, over to you on the same question of bilingualism.
Well, I do believe that it's important to be able to communicate with everybody in the province in their first language. The NDP recognizes and values the bilingual nature and linguistic duality that makes this province unique. It's a positive, it's not a negative. When we combine our forces, when we learn about each other, we are better together and we can do more, we can accomplish almost anything. To reopen the language debate at this point is really counterproductive and irresponsible, and I don't believe that that's what we should be doing, as we've seen being done by some of the other parties. I have been up to Shippagan 3 times now to learn French, but what I love more than anything is learning about the culture, the Acadian culture, the poetry, the history, the music, and everything that goes along with that. And so I look forward to continuing to improve my French. It's come a long way in a year, and I look forward to building those bridges across the province.
Thank you. Mr. Gallant.
The diversity of our province and the diversity of our country is one of our biggest strengths. I think it's important for us to celebrate all of our backgrounds and different cultures. I think it's important for a premier or a minister to be showing to the other linguistic community, or to both linguistic communities, that they care about them. Therefore, I think that when somebody is a minister of the Crown, when somebody is a premier, when somebody is a leader of the opposition, or even an MLA, that they should take time to learn the other second official language if they're unilingual. With that said, I think it's also very important to offer chances to all New Brunswickers to be able to learn a second language in this province. That's why we restored French immersion to grade 1. That's also why we will provide free language training for any New Brunswick adult that would like to learn a second official language. We are very proud of the fact that we are officially bilingual. It brings economic opportunities and it strengthens our social fabric.
Thank you. Mr. Austin.
Well, it's certainly an asset to be bilingual as a premier. It's an asset to be bilingual in any capacity of daily life. But I want to read to you a quote by Premier Louis J. Robichaud in 1969 when official bilingualism was implemented. He said, and I quote, "With respect to the civil service, the fact that a man or a woman is unilingual will not be a hindrance to the appointment and promotion in the civil service while other qualifications being equal." I believe in what Mr. Robichaud said in that day, that we should not allow language to trump experience, qualifications, and the ability to get things done. We've done this for too long in New Brunswick, allowing language to divide us and allowing language to trump qualifications and skills. The People's Alliance is determined to respect the right of both Francophone and Anglophone citizens in this province while doing it in a common sense, practical way that will work for all New Brunswickers.
Thank you. Mr. Coon.
Well, I think it's very important that a premier has the ability to have a conversation with people in either of the official languages as they travel around the province, because how are you going to understand what people's concerns are or understand the situation that they're in? I think it's really key to have that ability. I'm so proud of our province, what we've achieved in New Brunswick, because our Acadian and other Francophone communities are strong. They haven't lost their language. Their culture is vibrant. If we hadn't taken these steps 50 years ago and improved them over time, many Francophones would have been assimilated in this province, and that would have been a disaster. We've got other languages hanging by a thread, like the Wolastoqiyik language in New Brunswick, and we need to focus on that if there's, as well. And if there's any province in the country that has the ability to act to save a language, it's ours. So there's an area we need to also address. But you know, you can get service in either French or English wherever you are in this province, when you're sick, when you're injured, when you're in a car accident, and that's how it should be.
Thank you, Mr. Coon. This roundtable will be 2 minutes, and I'm going to start with Mr. Gallant. Does language divide us or unite us?
Well, first off, let me just say that I think Gerald's jab at me was pretty funny. Second, let me just say as well that I'm proud of the ministers and the MLAs of our caucus that have been working hard to learn a second official language. We have Francophones that are trying to do their best to learn English and improve their skills. We have Anglophones that are doing the best they can to learn French. And they show in their speeches, making sure that they speak both languages as much as possible to respect both linguistic communities.
Would you mandate all of your ministers to learn a second language?
All of my ministers? Well, I would certainly, yes, I would want them all to be taking language training, absolutely. Whether they succeeded or not is another question, but I'd want to make sure that that was part of what they were doing as cabinet ministers. We've got to ensure that in this province we work together, and we will not ever work together if we continue to divide us by language the way Mr. Austin here is trying to do.
Oh, give me a break.
It's exactly what you're trying to do.
Listen,
what you're trying to do. So it's important.
The people's
It's important, I believe, that all New Brunswickers travel the province and get to know each other's communities.
Okay, Mr. Austin, you can rebut that.
Listen, the reality is we did nothing to divide this province. It was the red, the blue, not much difference, the blue and the red, which is dividing this province. We didn't create the official language commissioner's office and increase her mandate to go on a witch hunt after unilinguals. We're not the ones that continue to put in overreaching policies on language to divide our people. We didn't do it. We're trying to stop it.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Ms. McKenzie to jump in because we want to know what the Orange has to say on the issue.
First of all, thank you. My ministers would be required to learn French.
You talked about not bringing up the language issue, but do you acknowledge that there isn't an issue related to language and services like ambulances?
A good leader of this province would work to unite the two linguistic communities.
Okay, thanks, folks. We're going to go to the next question, and that question is going to come from Katrina Clarke, and it's on the issue of municipal reform, and the question is for Mr. Bourque.
Mayors of the 3 biggest cities have been asking for years to have more control over their own destiny. Municipalities have also been begging for years. Will any of you commit to handing over power to the cities, specifically Tri-Cities?
I think, yes, the Finn report was done up, and I looked it over, and I think there's a good plan laid out there. Some of it has been implemented, some of it hasn't, and it's been put on the shelf and collecting dust, and I think it really should, be looked at. And that's it. We would look at it and see if we can't come to some conclusion, because it would be a lot better if everything was organized better.
Thank you, Mr. Bourque. On the issue of more powers for the municipalities.
I think this is an issue that is long overdue in being addressed. It's really important that we have a careful, measured, balanced approach to where we allocate the different powers between the provincial government and the municipal governments. I think we have to look at how we organize our cities and surrounding towns so that everybody gets a fair shake. I did present to the City of St. John on this issue, and they came up with some examples of how some of the powers could be transferred between the 2 levels of government. And many of them made a lot of sense and are long overdue. But it is important that we make sure that nobody is detrimentally affected, and that it's done in a way that is beneficial to the overall population.
Thank you. Mr. Gallant.
Our municipalities and communities play an essential role in ensuring that we're creating more opportunities for our families and a fair economy for all New Brunswickers. That's why we listen to the municipalities and we modernize the Municipalities Act. This is something that has been asked for decades. It's something that many previous governments promised that they would do and did not deliver. Well, we did. We also modernized the Community Planning Act as well in consultation with municipalities. And we also are listening to the leaders of our communities and municipalities across the province. I personally have done several tours to meet with the regional service commissions, which are comprised of mayors and councillors that would come to these meetings, to listen to them on how we can work together to create more economic activity in their regions, better services in healthcare and education in their regions, and how we can ensure that they have a good quality of life. That's also why we directly listened to their recommendation and provided for leads for Opportunities New Brunswick to have economic development agency agents in the communities working with the RSCs.
Thank you. Mr. Austin.
As former deputy mayor of the village of Minto and a councillor in the village, I can tell you that it was very frustrating as an elected official locally to be able to do really what the council wanted to do in our area with the taxes we received. I'll give you an example. We had crosswalks on our main street, and we passed a motion as a council to install flashing lights to help the safety improvement in our village. Unfortunately, the provincial government came down and told us we couldn't do it. Something as simple as a light on a crosswalk, the provincial government overrid us on that. So we have to give more structure and more authority to the local councils. There's no question about that. Now, I will commend the current government on modernizing the Municipalities Act. I do think that was a good move. I think that was beneficial in the long run, but it still has a long way to go. In terms of taxation, we've talked about even giving the power of assessment back to municipalities so that they have the ability to collect the taxes and keep the revenue for their own municipalities without the province coming in and taking it over.
Thank you. Mr. Coon.
Thank you. Absolutely, our communities need more authority and local control to ensure that they and their citizens can help shape their future. But that means that we've got to ensure there's a strong local process of democracy that is participatory, that citizens are operating at the local level in a very democratic environment. And so we would amend the Municipalities Act to ensure that that were the case. And I'll take one simple example. Currently, councillors are not legally in the Act accountable to their constituents in their wards if they're operating in wards. That should be the case. That's just one little example, but I think there are many others. So instead of just talking to mayors and councils, we would engage the citizens of communities around the province to talk to them about what they want to see in terms of local governance and local authority to make sure it's locally democratic.
Thank you. Mr. Higgs, Municipal Reform.
Well, when I speak to mayors and councillors throughout the province, you know, I get the message that the modifications that were made to this Act over the last 4 years were very minor in nature, more of a headline than an actual result. You know, when they tell me about they need more powers in relation to what they do, I agree with that completely. We have in our platform a municipal tax reform model, and what we're proposing is that we do transfer tax ability to the municipalities. Do that in a structured way to give them to set the tax rates that make sense for their community, to allow them to grow their community and take responsibility for that to happen. You know, centralizing government in a way that controls all and then political distributions around the province to support a political party's behavior is unacceptable in today's climate. So I'm excited about a real municipal reform, and yes, that includes assessments, and yes, that can include the double tax to give them more room on areas that actually they can tax different industries in different ways in order to improve their income base. We can work with them to make it happen.
Thank you, Mr. Higgs. So we're going to have 2.5 minutes of open discussion on this, and I'd like to open with a question for Ms. McKenzie, which is, should the power of ability to amalgamate rest with cities if that were a part of municipal reform? Would you support that?
Well, I think if a number of municipalities want to amalgamate, that the door should be open to do that, and I can't imagine a provincial government that would not help.
So you live in St. John, and we have Rothsay, Quispam.
And yeah, that's right. And they, you know, that's not the case. The 3 municipalities do not wish to amalgamate at this time, and it, I believe, mostly has to do with the taxes that people pay in the different municipalities.
Mr. Austin, is that we have to wait for everybody to agree?
Well, I think it's important that the provincial government provide the information to people on what amalgamation means. I mean, you have people living in outside areas of the city, they question, are my taxes going to go up? What added benefits of services am I going to receive? Legitimate questions. So that's why I don't agree with forced amalgamation, but I do believe it's up to the provincial government to provide accurate information to those residents and to facilitate cities and outside areas that are willing to come together as one municipality.
Mr. Higgs,
yes.
you talked about taxation powers for the cities. Thinking about the big three cities here, what would you hand them?
Well, I think the interesting thing is to look at what their tax base really is. And in St. John, of course, industry is a big tax base for St. John. So our industry is paying their fair taxes in relation to other industries in the country. That opportunity for cities to take advantage in a respectful but in a competitive way, so we can encourage investment but do it in the right way. In talking about the amalgamation side, I wouldn't agree with forced amalgamation, but I think we have to recognize the important centers that we have and how we can work more closely to get better results for the citizens.
Mr. Gallant, on taxation?
Yeah, I just want to point out that I'm very surprised to hear Blaine Higgs changing his discourse. When we raised taxes on the 1% richest in this province, he was against that. When we raised taxes on corporate, on large corporations, Blaine Higgs and the Conservatives were against it. We raised taxes on the 1% richest and large corporations so we could invest more in education, invest more in health care,
Mr. Higgs, your chance to rebut that. Did you flip-flop on that?
What happened when they made an arbitrary raise, and you talk to any accounting firms, investment firms, and what they'll tell you is money left New Brunswick. It was supposed to be a net gain of 30 million. It went down 30 million. So that's what happens when you cause people to leave and you're not competitive with other provinces. You chase them out of your province.
Mr. Austin, are either of them right?
No, listen. This is just asinine. I mean, for Mr. Gallant to go on and talk about, you know, corporate taxes, the LNG terminal plant was reassessed with a 69% reduction in assessment properties.
Of our government.
Yes, okay, but not what they should be. Not what they should be.
All right, folks, I think we hit a nerve there too, but that's the end of that segment.
Not what they should be.
Thank you. Thank you all. Question from Adam Hiras, and the question is to Ms. McKenzie, and the topic is seniors.
Ms. McKenzie and leaders, in 10 years' time, New Brunswick is forecast to have well over 100,000 people over the age of 75. In 20 years, it'll be about 135,000 people. How the province deals with this growing gray wave is important, but potentially an even more important question is how can the province find the workforce to grow or even sustain the existing economy?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Hiras. And as I mentioned earlier, we have devoted a lot of our platform to addressing this issue. We would make sure that all the new federal home care funding help to expand the extramural program and other home care programs so that seniors can receive the care in their home. We also have a pharmacare program, which will again help seniors and other people keep from using the higher levels of care that they need and keep them in their homes, keep them in their community, keep them with their families, and keep them with their support network. We would look at expanding telecare to provide advocacy and referral services, and we would create a community care public agency. We would look at the nursing home situation because we are told from every single jurisdiction of this province that the ratios of care to patients is too low. And so we would raise that from 3.1 hours to 3.5 hours effective immediately so that we don't see seniors being referred to higher levels.
Thank you. Mr. Gallant.
To develop the workforce that we need to have a thriving economy, we're going to invest more in education, training, and youth employment opportunities. We're going to invest to increase our literacy skills, introduce coding in our schools, and ensure trades are there in our high schools across the province. We're going to invest to make sure that we have free childcare so that parents that need the most support can get into the workforce or pursue their studies. Free tuition for those that need the most support so that they can not only go to university or college here in New Brunswick, but they can gain the skills that we need for a strong workforce. We would invest to ensure we have more youth employment opportunities through the Youth Employment Fund, and we would forgive the interest on provincial loans to keep our graduates here in the province. When it comes to senior care, I lived with my grandparents for quite some time with my family. I saw them go through Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. I recognize firsthand the challenges they face. We'll enhance the CPP, invest massively in home care, and create more nursing home beds in this province.
Thank you. Mr. Austin.
I talk to developers all over this province, and they tell me the crushing burden of the double tax is just too much for them to expand, and many of them are packing up and leaving. Think of the tens of millions of dollars that go around New Brunswick rather than into New Brunswick because of this double tax. That's why we are committed to eliminating the double tax, which will allow developers to hire more contractors, plumbers, electricians, laborers to help stimulate the economy. I believe the elimination of this double tax would have a huge impact on the economy of New Brunswick and the prosperity going forward. Now, I believe in terms of senior care, when you have a growing economy, the government has more revenue to work with. Directly related, again, to senior care, first off, the home support workers, they need to be paid. You cannot pay a home support worker $12, $13 an hour when they're getting $17 in Nova Scotia. You got to pay them a fair and reasonable wage to retain and help with recruitment so you can keep seniors in their home longer.
Thank you. Mr. Coon.
You know, there's so much that's good about our province, and I'm grateful to live here. And I'm grateful for the seniors that we have in our province because they have so much to offer. And people have got to stop treating seniors as liabilities. We hear it all the time from the media, from some politicians. It's just plain wrong. I want to see seniors integrated as they age to benefit from their experience and their expertise in our schools, in our health system, even to help inform public policy in this province. Imagine asking seniors for their opinions on how should we improve the province and tackle some of the challenges we've got. So to me, we need to change our mindset in the way we think about the senior members of our population. The other part of the question, which was twofold, Adam, I guess, was about the workforce. And one of the things on that we need to do is ensure that we get some further authority in New Brunswick from the federal government over immigration and settlement, because too many international students who have been here for 4 years are having to leave, and we need to be able to help them stay.
Thank you. Mr. Higgs.
Well, you know, I guess certainly getting rid of the double tax, we announced that today because we agree with that. We need more private sector investing here. And I also agree that the seniors in our province, we should be treating them as an opportunity, not a liability. An opportunity to give them the best quality of life possible and not grabbing their assets in the process, which we saw Gallant do early in the mandate. You know, the opportunity for us is not to be cutting ribbons on more buildings. It's going to be cutting ribbons on real service delivery. And when I've talked earlier, it's in our platform. We want a home care model that is a career in healthcare. We have an opportunity right here to have a future for people in healthcare, to go anywhere they want, but to start out at a time when we need them the most, because we need young people being involved in our home care services. There will always be a need for nursing homes, but that's not the first stop. Let's have a system that works. We have 6,000 private sector jobs that we've lost in this province. We have fewer people paying more taxes. We need to have the money to invest for better services in health and social systems and in our education.
Thank you. And Mr. Bourque.
Just like a second, Jennifer said there that they're going to move the hours from 3.1 to 3 point something. And I really know that in the healthcare system, you can't say, oh, that's all you get is so many hours. You have to, each patient is different, so it takes more time to look after one than the other. And the system should not mandate it that it's got to be that many minutes and that's it. And Mr. Gallant was talking about all the jobs and stuff and that. Well, if there's so many damn jobs in this country, why is the people leaving? They graduate and have to move out because there's no work here. They just got it all wrong. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Bourque. We're going to move to the open discussion. We've got 2 minutes. I'm going to start with Mr. Gallant.
After 4 years of Blaine Higgs cutting into education, healthcare, and infrastructure, the population of our province shrank. Since we've been investing strategically, the population has grown to its largest peak we have ever seen in this province. When it comes to senior care, we have secured $75 million over 3 years to innovate. When it comes to the assets, Blaine Higgs just misled you. The asset policy that was put forward, we listened to seniors and families, we revoked it, it was a mistake, and it will never happen under a Liberal government.
Mr. Higgs, talk about that, please.
No, that was one of the times that Mr. Gallant's memory failed again. I mean, we've seen that memory fail a few times over the last while, most certainly in the last day or so. But the situation that we have in terms of investing, as Mr. Gallant will say, more money into buildings, you know, this isn't going to solve the issue. We need nursing home care for sure. We need buildings to house that, but we need a home care model. We need to have a better service in each home where they need it and when they need it.
So the NDP has a clear plan, We are looking at shortages of paramedics, we're looking at shortages of nurses, we're looking at shortages of doctors, we're looking at shortages of people across the system. And our government would invest in expanding the program and increasing the number of nurses and doctors and other experts that come out of our universities. And so if you look at the program at St. John UNB campus, for example, for producing physicians, it's a really good program. These are doctors that understand social medicine.
Investment talk.
Yeah, and look, I really hope Mr. Higgs instructed his staff to remove our logo off the platform before he photocopied it and called it his own. You know, it's very important that we look at where these ideas come from. When we talked about the elimination of double tax, we talked about that years ago. When we talk about home care, paying them more money, that's what we've been pushing.
Criticism, Mr. Higgs?
We've been pushing that for years.
I think my only comment is, what year was it you ran for the Conservatives, Mr. Austin?
Really? Really?
Right.
That's the best? Okay.
Mr. Coon?
The thing here is we've got to find a way to keep our...
Oh, okay, folks, I'm sorry, that's all the time we have for that question. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. And I'd like to thank the audience as well. I hope you learned something. I know that I did. All right, so we're going to go to the closing statements, and so first I would like to ask Ms. McKenzie.
In closing, I want to talk about our campaign with a clear vision for a progressive future for New Brunswickers, where nobody's left behind and where youth want to stay. Our platform and our commitment to you is a complete package. Raising minimum wage goes hand in hand with improving workplace standards and eliminating precarious work. Childcare is a key component for lifting young families to a living wage and releasing 18,000 new workers into the economy. Our carbon reduction fund not only transitions us to a green future where youth want to stay, but it creates thousands of jobs of the kind that New Brunswickers are hungry for. We are creating jobs on the one hand and releasing workers into the workforce on the other. With a plan for pharmacare and a focus on community health care, we can improve our public health care system so that everyone has an equal access to care and wait times are shorter. My commitment to you is to make the changes that will improve your life and that of those you love. As the only woman leader of a party with over 50% women candidates, we will be able to champion these issues. Since I became leader of the NDP, we've been talking about the real issues that are important to you, like $15 an hour minimum wage, like childcare, like home care.
Thank you. Mr. Gallant?
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to my colleagues for making this debate possible. We have a choice in this election. Do we want to proceed with Blaine Higgs's approach of cutting into education, healthcare, and infrastructure? Or do we want to invest to create a fairer economy that provides more opportunities for our families? A Liberal government will invest to help families that are struggling to get ahead, much like my family struggled when I was young. We will invest to create a fairer economy, raising the minimum wage to $14, freezing power rates for 4 years, and imposing pay equity on large businesses. We will invest to create more opportunities for our youth. Free tuition, free childcare, the Youth Employment Fund, and we will protect the environment, and we will ban single-use plastic bags from retail stores. And we will invest to reduce wait times to our healthcare system, creating non-urgent care centers to reduce ER wait times, investing to hire more doctors, more nurses, and healthcare professionals, and investing in our hospital infrastructure and equipment. On September 24th, I ask for your support. I ask that you vote Liberal so we can keep moving New Brunswick forward.
Thank you. Mr. Austin?
Ladies and gentlemen, we just can't keep doing this. Tweedledee and Tweedledum have brought us to the point of bankruptcy in this province. Declining service, raised taxes, and on it goes. Now, I understand. I get the loyalty that comes with traditional politics and political parties. I understand how fathers and grandfathers voted a certain way, and we feel that pull to do the same. But ladies and gentlemen, this is ruining our province, and the evidence is right before us. I ask you to look for a different approach. Look for an approach that we offer that doesn't just offer solutions and how we're going to do things, but it gives a full plan on making the balanced books acceptable for New Brunswickers, for getting more staff in places where it's needed. We believe we can turn this province around and get taxes lowered and get the economy going once again. I'm asking you, on September the 24th, vote People's Alliance and be a real change for New Brunswick. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coon.
Thank you. It's time to start talking and take action, really. That's what we need. But if we're going to have political change, there's got to be a change in our politics. That is what a Green government would do under my leadership in New Brunswick. You've seen me in action in Legislative Assembly. I'm principled, I'm effective, and I'm a good listener. This election is really, in the end, going to be about trust. Who do you trust to work with you, to celebrate our achievements, and to overcome our challenges together? I'm committed to serving the many, to secure your well-being and work for the common good of all. I will build hope, not foment despair. I will bring us together, not divide us and fan the flames of division. Together, we can build a future. While you won't see the word change on the ballot when you go into the voting booth on September the 24th, that is what your Green candidates represent. On September the 24th, I'm asking you to vote for the change that we all need. Please vote for your local Green candidate so that we can build a better New Brunswick together. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you. Mr. Higgs.
This election is about trust and experience. Our province is at a turning point. New Brunswick is on the verge of bankruptcy. It is the overspending during elections that is making it impossible to dig ourselves out of this financial mess we're in. And that is why I refuse to buy votes with costly election promises. I had a successful career before politics, and I don't need another job. But I have a love for this province, and I have a desire to fix this province with the people that we have as candidates to make it happen. But I'm going to fight with dignity. While the Liberals are busy spreading lies about me, I will be hard at work addressing the issues that matter to you. But let me be clear, I'm not closing schools or hospitals, and no one will lose their job, because together we can make a difference. We can fix this province. I'm going to build our economy and fight for our children's future. The days of accepting last place in New Brunswick are over. We don't need to be last in healthcare, in education, and the economy. We don't need our kids to leave our province. We can do this, but we need support to make it happen. A vote for any other party than the PC party will give Brian Gallant a second opportunity, and we can't afford another 4 years of Brian Gallant. You deserve better, we deserve better, and we can deliver better.
Thank you. Mr. Bourque, your closing statement.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm very glad that I was a dairy farmer, because I get used to the BS that we just got from the Liberals and the Conservatives. And that probably would have knocked me over. I'm a common sense guy. I've been a businessman. I helped organize an ambulance service and helped work on it for 25 years. I helped form New Brunswick Ground Search and Rescue and did all the other 13 teams, got them going. And I also started the Critical Incident Stress team in Fredericton, which was the first one in the province. And now we have them in every school and fire department and police force and everything. And it was all done not by being a real strong person that just took and told people what to do. It was by working with people and everybody getting their ideas together, and that's what we can do. I also think that Mr. Higgs here gave 20% more wood to the Irvins, and that should not have happened. We should stop the spraying, and we should stop clear cutting. And these things all are good for the province of New Brunswick, and these people are not making decisions that are good for the province. They just make decisions that will get them more votes.
Thank you, Mr. Bourque, and thank all of you. I want to take this opportunity to say about the leaders and about all of those people who are going to put their names forward, how important that it is. And I want to thank you on behalf of Rogers and the Telegraph-Journal. Don't forget to vote.